So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to review from our March meeting just some highlights, and then we'll go through everything for today. So we'll do some introductions. I think here we all know each other. We'll do a KAI update. There was a T-TAG call in April, and I don't know, Joseph, are you getting those announcements from John Johns for those T-TAG calls?
I am not.
Okay, because I had given him your name and email quite a while back, and I wondered about that. So I was on the call. It's always the second Monday of the month, and they did have one in April. And, of course, there were a couple announcements made, and I apologize because I had them on a notebook that I'd have at work and not here with me because I didn't know I was going to be at this conference until yesterday. So, but I will put that in the minutes because there were a couple of announcements made at the T-TAG calls and things that are happening. There was a long-term support service survey that John John sent out. And I wasn't really clear if he wanted tribal nursing homes to complete that, but he never responded to me. So we're just going to go ahead and do it. I think I'm going to go ahead and send that out for anyone that might want to complete that long-term support service survey that CMS and John Johns is doing. We did have our meeting to discuss the best practices for dementia because some of that we needed to do so Julie could move forward with her interview questions that she is working on now, I believe. That will be posted. That the first dementia best practice paper was posted on CMS.gov. It did get on there. You can go on CMS.gov and so were all the audio recordings for the last few meetings. So thank you to KAI for doing that. Don't forget we have a website for our tribal nursing homes, so we talked about that. Lisa reported on the QAOs. I'm sorry to say that Hannah Stalker from the University of Arizona Geriatric Workforce Enhancement Program is actually leaving us to go to Germany. She's finishing her PhD and she's moving to Germany. But I did contact the U of A, and we do have a contact there who won't be on the calls, but we will have a contact still with the GREP, of course. And, of course, I am a contact. And then we talked about some models for dementia care, and that's something I think that Blythe is going to be talking about today. Treating people like we want to be treated with person-centered care, giving people choices, addressing unmet needs. We talked about how in palliative care they use the word distress instead of a behavior, and it's just kind of being a cry for help, that we don't need to medicate or ignore that, and putting people in control who are doing the most direct care with the resident. We talked about tribe-centered care versus resident-centered care. Okay. And then we talked about the goals of care being high quality of life, keeping residents at the center of care, and creating a life that is meaningful and robust to the resident. And then we talked about redoing our dementia survey, and I'll let Lisa talk about that in a minute and maybe shorten it up a little bit. The one we did on SurveyMonkey, I don't believe we had a super great response, but I'll let Lisa talk about that. We did have our steering committee meeting on April 10th. In attendance were Melissa, Joseph Ray, Blythe, Val Crail, Lisa Johnson, and Julie and Jonathan from Kaufman and Associates. And so we did talk about the board relations survey, which Julie is currently working on. We have webinars coming up with KAI in June and July, so we need to nail down who's all going to be doing those webinars. And then, of course, Blythe agreed to talk today on this call. Okay? Anybody have any just quick questions on anything I just read? Okay, so we'll go ahead and just kind of go through the agenda for today. And Blythe, I'll make sure that you get at least a half an hour to talk with questions, okay?
No big deal.
Okay.
I'm flexible.
Okay. Well, we want to hear what you have to say, but so anyone who's on the call, if you do report, just keep that in mind, that we want to give Blythe plenty of time to speak. So, Jonathan, I'll let you start. Any updates from KAI that you need to give us?
Sure. We are in the process of working on the June best practices report about board relations. We have conducted one interview so far and are in the process of scheduling the rest. We've reached out to quite a few administrators via email. So we're hoping to have those interviews completed by May 12th. That is our target deadline.
Okay.
For the webinars, do you have a question? For the webinars, we determined the 2 webinars will be panel format with different representatives, and we just need to identify the 5 panelists for each webinar.
How many speakers for each?
We are hoping for 5, if possible.
Okay. Okay.
And we need to, I know we had talked before, but we need to begin developing panel discussion topics and questions as well.
I'm sorry, say that again. We have to do what?
We need to develop panel questions and discussion topics.
Right. And one of them will be on the best practice in dementia, and one will be on tribal relationships, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And which one did we say? I can't remember. Which one did we say was going to be in June? That was the dementia one, right?
Yes. Yeah, let me double check. I'm pretty sure that we said dementia. Yes, dementia is going to be the first one.
Yeah, sorry.
So I think what we need to do on this call is identify the 5 people then, Jonathan, who will be willing to do that webinar. And then those people, we probably need to put a call together pretty quickly, because my understanding from Julie is that you want that done about a month ahead of time. Is that correct?
If possible, yes.
So what would be your deadline for basically knowing what that webinar is going to be about? What would be the deadline?
The ideal deadline, let me look at the calendar. The webinar is going to be is scheduled for June 22nd.
Okay. So May 22nd?
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, a month out is what we really hope for.
Okay, so we need a call we need a call before May 22nd. So anyone that's on this call that would be willing to, I think some people on our last call actually volunteered. So I think we had, let me just look at that. We were going to contact, we were hoping Jordan Lewis to be a speaker on that dementia webinar, and Don Thibodeau. And by the way, my emails to Don Thibodeau are coming back. So if anyone has a good email for him, I contacted Nicole Lomé at Banner, and she does not have a good email for him either.
Email has changed, Debbie. I can give that to you right now real quick.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm typing and doing multiple things here. Hold on a second.
Yep, sorry. I just know it's important, and I want to make sure you get that information.
Okay, go ahead.
So it's the same Don Thibodeau. It's at foundationhealth.org.
Okay.
And for some reason that is try.com, but I think it's .org. But it's Foundation Health. They all their emails.
H-E-A-L. Okay.
Yep, Foundation.
Okay, so Health, HEALTH.org, right?
Correct.
Okay, now is there a dot between Dawn and Thibodeau?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So the next question is, Blythe, would you be willing to do that webinar, be one of the panelists on June 22nd?
I am out of town that week.
Okay. All right. Just checking. Sorry to put you on the spot. So,
no, that's okay.
Did you by any chance talk to Jordan?
This is Lisa. We've talked about it. I mentioned it, but we didn't have calendars, so I'm not sure what his and I know he travels a lot. But we'll just need to follow up with him.
Okay. So we'll get a hold of Dawn and Jordan, Dr. Lewis. And then is there anyone else on this call Tammy, I know you said that your group was willing to be a panelist. Are you still willing to do that?
Certainly.
Okay. Is your director, what about your other staff, your Carly or,
I think either of them would. We just, now that we know what the deadline is, we can get working on whatever we have to do.
okay, perfect. And Joseph, are you interested is anyone else on the call interested in doing that dementia webinar on June 22nd, being a part of that? Anyone else on this call?
If you're hurting for speakers, I'm always willing to speak, but I have people that work in nursing homes directly share their experience. I think it's a lot more powerful.
Right, I agree. So let's see if we've got Tammy. I mean, I can do it, and then we've got, hopefully we can get Dawn and maybe Jordan, and we'll have to put together something with the call. So, okay, I'll put the word out on that. Okay, is there anything else, Jonathan?
Nope, that's it.
All right, thank you for putting the calls on there. I appreciate that on cms.gov. If you haven't checked that out recently, you guys need to go check that out because there's a lot of new stuff on there. Okay, Lisa, I'm going to let you do a QIO update.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, this is Lisa Johnson with the Alaska QIO. And I guess my update piece would be around that dementia survey, which we did send out and had a pretty pitiful response. I apologize, I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I want to say it was 4 or 5 only. So that's, I'd say, hardly enough to really draw conclusions from. In Alaska, we've done one with so we have had a good response in our state. We had 14 out of the 18 respond last time I looked. So I've got good data across Alaska, but that, again, and we do have Alaska Natives in all of our nursing homes. For the tribal nursing home collaborative piece and that survey that just went out to the tribal nursing homes, we really did not get much of a response.
Okay, so you got response to maybe 4 or 5 of our tribal nursing homes across the country, correct?
Correct. I believe I shared that with you, didn't I?
I haven't seen the results yet. I don't think so. I don't remember seeing the results.
All right, well, my bad. Let me put that on my list, and I'll get that to you in the next day or so.
Okay. Do you think we should follow up and do actually, because KAI could do phone calls, right, Jonathan? Couldn't you follow up with a few of the nursing homes and see if you can answer those questions, or could you guys do that or not? I'm not sure what your time frame is.
I'd have to check with Julie to see if we're able to do that, because I know
this was a survey monkey that Lisa created it specifically to dementia, but I'm thinking the nursing homes who didn't get a response from, maybe we could contact or call them directly and see if they'd be willing just to, or we could resend it.
Jordan created the survey monkey. It's really, I just want to make sure I give credit where credit is due.
Okay. Did you create it? I thought you did.
I put it on Survey Monkey, but the questions came from Jordan, Dr. Lewis.
That's fine. Okay. All right. All right, Jonathan, can you check that and get back to me, please?
I will.
Because I think we need more than 4 to 5, and that would be helpful for the panel to have a little bit more input. Okay. So, one thing, Lisa, on the webinar, since Jordan would be aware of the 14 out of 18 that you got, he could share those on the webinar, correct? Even though they're not specifically tribal nursing homes, right?
I think both Jordan, Dr. Lewis, and Don Thibodeau would both have an excellent Alaska perspective, and we do have a high percentage of the tribal nursing homes. If you want to look at it that way, 3 of them are tribal. So
right. Okay, good. All right.
For once, our percentages are on the higher end of things.
Okay. Okay, that's excellent. Anything else you want to say coming from a QIO perspective?
I guess just if, briefly, I don't know how much of it's news to this group, but from the QIO perspective, there certainly is focus on the antipsychotic reduction, and, quality dementia care comes right into that. So I think the collaborative aligns well with what CMS is focusing on. Other things that are big in their world are the resident being the locus of control and resident-centered care. So, again, that ties in well with the work we're doing here. Things like antibiotic stewardship and C. diff. There's certainly some other clinically focused things that, as QIOs, we're charged with improving. But I think for the tribal nursing home group, the things that we are focusing on align very well with what CMS and the work that we do as QIOs. So nothing to report, I guess, just that we're aligned well, and that's a good thing.
Okay, excellent. Okay, and I did go to our QIO meeting here in Phoenix with Keith Chartier last week, and we did some exercises on the QAPI, and there was some stuff on SBAR. If you guys are familiar with that, we're looking at that, using the team steps. So that's helpful too to enact some of the stuff that we're talking about. So, are there any administrators other than Tammy on the call? Otherwise, Tammy, you want to just give us a quick administrator update?
Oh wow!
Yeah.
We are just trying to work on, we have not finalized our emergency preparedness, and we're working on that. We are working on trying to create an Alzheimer's community support group. We're finding there is a need on our reservation of families not knowing, whatever. We are remodeling our building. We are working on resident-centered, everything, everything that CMS wants, we're working on, in addition to about 500 other things. So we've got it good and chaotic here, and I think we're making some awesome progress.
Okay, thank you. We had our survey last week. The federal surveyors were at our facility last week. I was not there for the exit interview. I did meet with one of the surveyors last Thursday about our life safety, our disaster plan, all that piece. And, there were some pretty specific things that we do have a disaster plan, but really some things to think about with the communication. I'm hearing about it more today. For example, if you had to send your residents somewhere else, how would you, send the records with them? She said in some facilities the CNA would actually go along, almost like a private duty nurse or a private duty aide to go along with that resident to make sure their care was handled. So there's just a lot of specific things, and a lot of it, what I'm hearing today at this conference, is CMS actually projects that it would cost the nursing homes, I think they said about $38,000 in people's basically time and energy and effort to put together what they're requiring in November of this year. And that is something that he said, you're probably not going to hire someone to do this for you. This is something, because it has to be facility specific, that we as facilities need to sit down and talk through all these possible scenarios that could happen. And what are we going to do if this and if that? And so I will send along to all of you the PowerPoint from my conference today, and you can take a look at some of what they said. So. And we did,
Debbie, I'm sorry. We hired an individual that is her degree and area of expertise is emergency-based preparedness, and she is helping us to individualize specifically for our facility. And so we have contacted and done MOUs with other places to be able to take our residents in case of emergency.
Right. Okay.
This is Lisa in Alaska. Just real quickly, since we're on the subject, we had a call with our nursing home group yesterday, and they share recent survey findings, and specifically, they're writing up our nursing homes if they want to keep their stair chairs or boards in the stairwells. And I know we all just scratched our head and said that's insane. Our state surveyor said, yeah, I wouldn't move it if it was me. I would keep everything there. But then he called the nursing home back to say the feds are focused on that and they will write nursing homes up if there are stair chairs and such in the stairwell. Which, again, to me just absolutely no sense. So I haven't researched that. This was just yesterday, but I'm sharing.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, this is a good opportunity with the administrator's report if anyone's hearing things like that. Or you can forward anything to me and I'll send it out to the group. That's another avenue to do that. Okay, good. So I want to let Blythe have her time, and we're looking forward to hearing some things she has to say. And then Blythe, maybe you could leave some time, for people to ask questions. What we're trying to do here, and I just want to summarize this a little bit too, because it's so easy to meet on these calls and kind of lose sight of the big picture and what we're trying to do here. So we're coming together as a group of tribal nursing home stakeholders. We're trying to advocate for best practices for tribal nursing homes. We just keep that in mind as we talk. The whole purpose here is to make things better for our tribal elders, to say, hey, if you run a tribal nursing home, folks, these are things you should be doing. Here's some things that we think work, that we found to work, or that we found not to work. Here's what we should be doing. So let's just kind of keep that in mind as we go through. So, all right, thank you, Blythe. Go ahead.
So everybody, I think knows who I am, but I'm an enrolled member of Eastern Band, and I'm a certified medical director of our tribal nursing home here in Cherokee, North Carolina. We do have a memory care unit on this facility, and if you have questions, throughout this, then just pop in, and I'll leave time at the end. I'm sorry if you couldn't get the PowerPoint, but I'll just talk to you about, what's in the slides so you don't have to have that necessarily, and you can get it later. I'm just going to go over some general stuff, and some of you may have heard, themes of this before, because I do kind of like beat a dead horse about some of these things. When I was thinking about this and kind of dementia care best practices, we already assumed that these people have a dementia diagnosis in a facility, and so I do kind of want to take the opportunity to remind everybody that greater than 50% of residents in assisted living and skilled nursing facilities have some form of dementia or cognitive impairment, and something that myself and my nurse practitioner are seeing are so many of these residents on intake and admission don't even have a diagnosis of cognitive impairment or dementia. And so it's just the perfect opportunity when you're following them, even if it's over a short stay or a longer stay, that you have that opportunity to assess them in a better way and to make that diagnosis if you can. And usually we'll wait and let them settle in, for at least a week or so before we do any kind of cognitive assessments. But I do want to remind people that a lot of times they're coming in without that diagnosis. And I just did a trip to several tribes in Minnesota where I was going out and doing education for home care nurses and caregivers. And all I kept hearing over and over again is that the primary care providers aren't giving the diagnoses. And so I think that's part of the problem. And I just wanted to leave that as an opportunity for you guys to explore in your places to see if that's something that you feel that's happening, to have your antenna up to see if you think there are lots of residents who are missing that diagnosis on intake or admission, because that's an opportunity. Some of the areas, of particular focus for dementia patients are looking at food and fluids, and then pain management and social engagement. And those are kind of three ways of looking at areas that you could focus, both for kind of improving quality of life, as well as areas that might be the cause of any issues or prevention of behaviors. And I'll mention these again as areas that, in terms of best practice, that are areas of focus to help these residents have the best quality of life, and that's where you can put your areas of focus and resources and that sort of thing, and I'll talk more about that. Another thing that's getting a lot of attention is the life story for dementia patients on admission, especially if you have memory care units. So what you want to know is, everything you can about a person's background, and that's for lots of different reasons. A lot of times it's because you want to stick to their routines that they have at home as much as you can, and then you also want to know about the history and what they've been through, because that may affect the behaviors that they may manifest or their responses to people. You want to make their experience on the unit as similar as you can to home, and you want to be able to respond appropriately, if something happens. And for tribal elders in particular, one of the slides that I have in here shows all of the potential different historical experiences that they may have been through. And my grandpa, he was a full-blooded Cherokee Nation, and he ended up in a memory unit not at this facility. He was not in a tribal facility. And I don't think that people necessarily understood there that he was a prisoner of war, in World War II, and that he had that as an experience, and that he was now, this tribal elder who was experiencing very severe vascular dementia, and having to be on this memory care unit. He was very mistrustful, whatever, of non-native people. And so my dad had to go over and see him every single day just to help him with these horrible bowel movements he'd had from PTSD. So not only did he have, this vascular dementia, but he had a combination with PTSD that was really kind of making this picture murky for him. And if people didn't know that experience about him, they wouldn't understand why he would go through this in his sundowning every evening. And that's part of why it's so important to know about these experiences that they've been through. My grandmother went through boarding school, and so she had a completely different experience, and she couldn't speak the language because it was beaten out of her when she was younger. And if you didn't know that, you wouldn't understand why later in her life, when she had dementia, which was much milder than his, that she went through a very different situation. So these are the reasons that we get such an elaborate life story of these elders, and you most of the time just have to try to gather as much information from family members as you possibly can. Other aspects of their history that are really important are that, history of language use. If the family can tell you that they've ever spoken the tribal language, and that can be helpful if there was any substance use or any mood disorders or psychiatric issues. If there's a history of abuse that they know of, that's really important to know. Also kind of any other caregivers or people who are living in the home. Military history I like to know about. And then also head trauma, which I know is cited in our best practices information, and for us it's much more important just because of the, higher incidence of head trauma. And even when I'm doing consultation outpatient, that's one of the things that's so scary to me is how often I hear about tribal people that have had some kind of head trauma, whether it was related to car accidents, sports, baseball bats to the head. It really scares me about what we're looking at, for the future, and what's happening with them now. When I was talking about quality of life earlier and the three areas of focus, what we know from data and the recommendations now are that for dementia residents, most of their quality of life, from what we can tell, comes from relationships that are mostly, with staff, that seem to get developed over time, even if it's just with daily interactions. So that's kind of what we try to focus on, and having routine, staff, and having people that get to be really comfortable, with those residents. So that's really important. And you tend to notice that in your facility, the people who really like working with dementia residents and seem to take, just have a knack for that. And it's always important to be able to assess the dementia residents' abilities Because so often we have people that just assume that people can't, do something, or they're assuming that they can do more than they actually can. And I think coming up with strategies for behaviors is one of the things that I love the most about this, because you really get rewarded the more creative that you can be, because we don't have enough room on our memory care unit for all of the residents who should be back there. So we often have people who end up, out in the general area who really need to be back on the unit. But sometimes, nurses and CNAs come up with just genius ideas for keeping them busy or having activities for them. And we had a lady who had a horrible hemorrhagic stroke, and she was a previous alcoholic, and she ended up with really bad dementia and had some behavioral issues, and she was wheelchair bound and had some other chronic deficits, but she used to work as a secretary, and so she just needed a job. And so they basically put her to work here, and she would be, sorting papers and stuff like that, and they were even writing fake checks to her, and it was, so smart that while she was at her best and she was, needing something to do, that was something that they could do for her to keep her engaged. And so I think, anytime you can come up with ideas like that for people's behaviors, that it really does get rewarded. And we had even a tribal leader who was back on the memory care unit who was very young, and it was very unfortunate. And they would, come up with ways to have him be able to speak to people, back there. And we've had other people that just thought they were in charge on the unit. One lady in particular, and that was the way it was. She was kind of, basically in charge of things back there. And I think whatever, helps and allows, for people to be engaged and happy and have that good, quality of life, the more creative you can be, the better, because each person is different and unique and needs, something else to keep you happy. And again, it's about knowing about the background. What did they do for work? What did they enjoy? What were the preferences? And the environment does make a difference, but it's more about the feeling in the place rather than the structure. And I'll tell you that's what keeps me so happy about things here, because the structure here is terrible. Like, this place is, not great. Like, the unit is too small, the lighting is awful, they don't have private rooms, the bathroom is not great, it has a dark floor, which I think makes people think they're, like, gonna drown if they step in it, so there's a billion different improvements that could be made, but the staff are awesome, and their interactions with people are great, and the culture of this facility is really fantastic. And so I think if you can create that, or you can affect that, that's what's really going to help, especially in a memory care unit, or where you have, dementia residents, and anywhere that you can have activities or music or foods that are traditionally or culturally appropriate. That's going to be helpful for you. In terms of behaviors, I really do hate this word, and I think that people are kind of moving away from it, because it's kind of thought of as something bad, but really the behaviors are more of a response, or it's just an interaction, or it's just a means of communication. And so I think that, just the use of that word, I think it just sounds bad, and so somehow we should just change it to being like a means of communication, basically, because that's kind of what it is. And I always tell people to ask themselves what the unmet need is, and that's kind of why I created this sheet to be used on the memory unit, which is in the PowerPoint. I think you guys have gotten it before. Even though we focus on person-centered care, I think as much as you can standardize training or people's response to the care itself, or at least the training of it, the better. So I think if you can, train people like these are the things you need to look at if someone is, having a difference in communication or a response, then that can help people. That you're looking at weight change, when did they poop last? Are they having differences in their urine? Did they eat well? Has something changed with the staffing? Do you think it's a pain issue? Has there been any change with like people visiting? Other changes, on the unit. My worst fear was one time we had this like lice outbreak back there, or like one or two people got lice, and I was like, oh my God, now we have to do, treat everybody, and everybody's routine's going to get mixed up. They all had to have their, hair wash, and everybody's going to freak out. I just knew that it was going to cause all these behaviors and all this stuff, and everybody actually did, fairly well compared to what I was envisioning, but those are the things that you just kind of anticipate, that stuff is going to be happening, and I think the more you can kind of review these changes and stuff that's led up to this, that's what helps you identify, what the real reason is that something's happened and how you can fix it and help it, rather than just jumping to medications, which is what the response always was before. We're focusing so much more on trying to prevent behaviors now, and ways that we're doing that are trying to push more fluids, because we're realizing that, dehydration is much more of a problem than we anticipated before, and so is pain. And I have, as far as I know, pretty much all of my residents on the unit are on scheduled Tylenol if they're not on something stronger, because they've had something recent happen, like one person who's had a hip fracture who doesn't even remember the hip fracture, which is always interesting. But I mentioned with pain, that you should have stuff scheduled and no PRNs, and that they always need something to prevent constipation if you're doing that. And then the other thing with preventing behaviors is having those routines and avoiding staffing issues. So I think overall, those are kind of major things that we work on. And if, when it comes down to medications, there's a lot of debate about the memory enhancers. And once they're on the memory care unit, to be honest, if they're moderate to severe dementia, that Aricept is probably not doing a whole lot by then. Most of them are on the Namenda for sure. Some of them are on the patch if they can't tolerate PO meds by that point. But there's debate about whether that's really doing anything. It really comes down to how long they've been on it, if it really did much in the first place. If they're stable on it, I'm not going to take them off, because there's a chance that they're really going to tank and do poorly from that point on. So if they've been on it, I'll leave them, because they're, most likely stable. But I don't a lot of times start people in moderate to severe dementia on new memory enhancers, unless I feel like it may make a difference with the behaviors, which a lot of times, the Namenda or medications like that can actually help with some of the behaviors, which I didn't actually learn until I did fellowship. I just thought they actually helped with memory, and I was surprised to learn when I, actually rotated with memory specialists that no, actually we use those medications to help with everything from, wandering to hallucinations to sleep to apathy, and sometimes they can actually work better than any other medications for that. So just an FYI, in terms of best practices, they're not standard of care anymore, especially on units or in facilities, but sometimes we may end up using those first for behaviors because they are better tolerated a lot of times than some of the other, psych meds that are used. So I did just want to mention that briefly. And I had cases at the end, but that's only if people don't have questions. That I just think sometimes talking about all the crazy stuff that I've dealt with here is helpful. But if you have questions, then please, ask me those.
Blythe, this is Debbie. Can you comment on your experience with, say, like a dementia day program, where the people would just go for the day as opposed to an actual, like, locked unit or locked versus unlocked? I mean, what are you seeing out there?
I think they actually work great. So we don't have one for, tribe specific that I've seen in the places that I've been to or around here. But the closest one that we have to here is at an hour away, and I've been at that one and rotated there for a while, and actually it's run really well and works really well, but it has to have multiple different levels, basically. And so they have, the level where people need some one-on-one supervision, and then they have, the next level where people are a little bit more independent. They had a room there, and it's funny because I was just talking about this earlier, that we needed this room here. They have a room where if people are getting really agitated, that they can go in this room, and it's really great. They have aromatherapy in there. They have very tactily pleasing things in this room. It's very calm. They have calming music and kind of one of those, it's not a disco light, but you know what I'm saying? One of those lights in the room that's very, nice. It's like basically a calming room there. And the staff are very well trained, for adult day services, but they even have a respite couple of rooms where family members can stay overnight if they want to there, if their family members are enrolled in that program. But it works, really well, and caregivers or care partners love the program, and it's done really well there, and they always have tons of people on the waiting list.
Do you know where that is, the name of it?
It's Care Partners. It's in Asheville, North Carolina. It's a branch of Care Partners. Care Partners is this giant kind of campus where they have actually a hospice house there. They have a rehab facility, and they have adult day services as a separate building there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have questions?
I don't.
So Blythe, we had at U.N.I.T.E, we had created a behavioral expressions team. This was quite a couple of years ago already. And so when you were talking about not really calling it a behavior, we called it a behavioral expression, and it was exactly what you're talking about, that they're trying to communicate with us. It's our job to try to figure out what's going on. And so it was, just this idea that they had an unmet need, and that was usually the root cause. When we huddled, we actually created a little staff huddle template, to ask some of certain questions, to try to get to the root cause.
I like that expression. That's another one, that could be used too,
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like that, I don't know, for some reason that behavior has some kind of negative, connotation to it. I think that's the problem, why people have historically had such a knee-jerk response seeking a medication first, and sometimes that is necessary if it's severe and it's, that there could be physical consequences, and nothing non-pharmacologically as an intervention has worked, but all these other things have to be looked at first, right?
Dr. Winchester, I was just going to comment, so much of what you're saying is true, and one of the things about behaviors, the word behaviors, is it implies that you can control them, and that you're doing something wrong. So that's why I think that term distress really spoke to me as a nurse, because I think most caregivers hate to see one of their patients or residents or someone that they're caring for in distress. So I think that getting away from that word is really important.
Yeah. Well, I think even the term dementia, when you're with, a lot of current researchers and everything, that there's this movement towards, like brain failure, because we talk about heart failure, lung failure, and, so the terms themselves involved in this, disease process, I think are becoming outdated. And maybe with the stigma that surrounds this term, changing that, maybe that will help as well. I'm not sure.
That's a good thought. The other comment I had was a lot of times, well, before we started really addressing this at our facility, the staff would say, oh, that's just how they are. You know, they've always been that way. And I don't know if you can comment on getting past some of that.
So something that's really, I think, important, you know, is that education and having someone who's doing, you know, training. And I actually think that role play in terms of behavior is really helpful. And we did a session last year here, and actually I'm trying to set up training this year. It's going to be something different, but last year we did a role play with dementia behaviors, and of course I'm the one who has the behaviors, but but I think it's really helpful to do that, to put people in the situation and be the one, you know, or simulate that, to have them, you know, do that, practice that response, the approach, you know, to someone. It's so important. That approach is half of the battle and half of the problem, to be honest, that starts this. So training is just so important. It needs to be done on a consistent basis. You know, everything surrounding the language, the tone that you use with people. We still have so many people that use that baby tone that just drives me crazy with dementia residents, you know, talking to them like they're small children, which is just, you know, can be so upsetting to some of them anyways, and it does require that a lot of education about every aspect of the process. And I got really upset when we had a referral from a group home, and somebody was documenting on this resident and was putting in the documentation that this person was whiny. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, you know, how horrible that nobody has educated this person about this person's disease, to where they're putting in that this person is having a whiny day, that this person is whiny, and what kind of care must this person, you know, be getting. But this is the kind of thing that we have to educate people about, that, you know, that none of this is intentional. It's a part of the process by whichever area of their brain is affected. You know, it's affecting their insight, their judgment, their ability to control, you know, what's being said, how they're acting, the words that are coming out of their mouth. It's just, you know, it takes a lot, but it just requires education.
Okay.
I'm curious.
I appreciate that. We have about 4 minutes left, just giving you a heads up.
This is Lisa, and I'm curious real quick, in terms of the education, do you guys use TIPA Snow, or is anyone familiar with TIPA Snow? Or do you have your own programs?
Absolutely. No, I use TIPA Snow all the time, and I'm always sending our director of nursing all the links to her webinars, and actually she comes close to here, so I send her all of the links to when she's going to be around, and I see her at the American Geriatric Society. She does a session there, and in my fellowship, you know, they talked about her, and she has free stuff online, and anytime I present somewhere, I say, if you want more intense, you know, behavioral training, this is the one to go to, because if you ever get a chance, you know, and you see her in person, she's very kind of in your face and aggressive, and it's really fantastic as kind of like as an experience in learning and how to approach different, you know, situations and along the spectrum of dementia care, and it's awesome. So I'm always talking about her. I'm sure she's going to hear at some point, like, do you know this Dr. Winchester? Like, she's talking to you all the time.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention for all of us that, you know, with the CMS, the new regulations, that training all your staff in dementia care is like a big deal on the new regulations. So.
Yeah, and I think the documentation is really important too, and that's the training I'm going to be doing this year, is actually, you know, how to properly document behaviors, because so many people, you know, knee-jerk put agitation, and I'm like, that is just crazy, you know, because agitation is a word that's way overused, I think, in dementia care. And so I'm going to be working on a session for how are the different ways that you can, you know, describe and document and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think sometimes it's helpful to just document, like I try to tell the staff, document what you're actually seeing? Like they repeated this word 10 times, or they reached out calling for so-and-so. Like actually say what's happening.
Yes, like put in quotes a lot.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And they do that actually on the unit quite a bit. You know, like today, I was just back there before I came out here, and some people did a really excellent job, you know, about saying, you know, what, and to the point where there's profanity in there. And I'm actually, you know, that's the one time that's great when they actually, you know, have literally put in quotes, you know, what the person is saying, because it really does paint the picture of what's going on, you know, and what this person is saying back there. That is what I want. So I love it when they do that. And I'm like, yes, that is what I want.
Right. And also, like, maybe how long is, you know, how many times did it happen in an hour, or, you know, how long did they say that same word for, or whatever, you know, like, kind of time it, get a sense of, like you say, paint that picture.
Exactly.
Okay, we're at 12:59. Does anyone have any specific or any other questions for Dr. Winchester before we finish the call?
No, but great discussion.
Yes, thank you very much. And everyone, I hope everyone's still on the call. I hope we didn't lose anyone. Did anyone else join? I have for attendance myself, Blythe, Tammy, Jonathan, Lisa, and Joseph Ray. Is anyone else on the call today? Okay, so I will contact Dr. Lewis, Jordan Lewis. Tammy, I'm putting you down for 2 on the webinar in June. And Lisa, if you can please, no, Jonathan, you were going to get back to me on something. Can't remember
on the
what.
Survey.
Yes,
if
we can do that. We'd like to try to maybe get a few more. If you guys could make a few phone calls on that, that would be wonderful. So, okay? And I will forward the webinar that from today. I will forward the PowerPoint and then a couple other things on disaster preparedness that might help you guys that I've picked up recently, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all. Don't forget to go to cms.org.